parents set up a tent in my front yard so I'd give them my house, but being the good son I am, I got them better accommodation in jail. I know the title sounds crazy, but let me explain. I was born when my parents were only 17 years old. They had to drop out of school to find jobs and support me. My father was furious about the situation, as he had planned to play baseball in college, but ended up working at a fast food restaurant. My mother couldn't raise me either because she worked all day cleaning houses to earn some money. Instead, I spent all my time with a neighbor who became a better parental figure than my own parents. From very early on, I realized I was an unwanted baby. The only ones who loved me were my neighbor and my paternal grandparents. My maternal grandparents didn't even want to know about me. When I was 5 years old, my sister was born, and the differences in the affection they gave us became noticeable, even when I was very young. We lived in a house with just 2 bedrooms, so at first we had to share a room. But then I was completely kicked out of the bedroom so she could have her own space. They told me I was too big to share a room with a girl, so for the next 5 years I had to sleep on the couch. Also, I had very few belongings. Almost all my clothes were hand-me-downs and I barely had school supplies. The only decent thing I had was an old video game console, which my paternal grandparents gave me for a birthday. At 12 years old, my parents decided to move, but the move didn't include me. Luckily, my paternal grandparents took me in. I'll just call them grandparents from now on. Things got much better with them. Not only did I have my own room, but there were other kids my age in the neighborhood. I was able to make friends and have a more normal childhood. I went to their houses to play, we rode bikes, played ball in the street, things I could never do before. My grandparents also spoiled me with gifts like more modern consoles, toys, and new clothes. When I turned 18, I got a job and moved out on my own. But after 2 years, I moved back in with my grandparents. They were getting older and needed help. I preferred to save on rent so I could cover their expenses. During all this time, my parents never worried about me or offered help for my grandparents. They didn't call or ask how I was doing. They simply disappeared. I didn't have a relationship with my sister either. She simply disappeared from my life along with them. My grandfather was very careful with money. When he was young, his family lost everything in the Great Depression, and that marked him. He wasn't stingy, but he was very cautious. He always wanted to build a bomb shelter in the backyard, but never did. Instead, he made sure to be prepared for emergencies, like having a generator in case the power went out during winter storms, which, where we lived, happened more often than we'd like. Luckily, there was always extra gasoline for the generator, and that kept us warm during those nights when the power went out. About 4 years ago, my grandmother passed away suddenly. My grandfather was devastated, heartbroken. About 2 years later, one morning, while I was preparing breakfast, I noticed he wasn't coming down. The smell of coffee always attracted him to the kitchen, so I went up to check on him. He wasn't moving. I called 911, but when the paramedics arrived, they told me he had passed away in his sleep. I had also suffered the death of my grandmother previously, but I knew my grandfather was devastated by the loss of the love of his life. So his death didn't take me by surprise, as his heart couldn't bear being without my grandmother. My parents showed up at my grandfather's funeral, but they caused a scene. They argued loudly with other people and were quite rude. My sister came wearing a sparkly dress, completely inappropriate for a situation where people were all dressed in black. They were only there for the inheritance, since they hadn't attended my grandmother's funeral, claiming they didn't have time for that, although we all knew they didn't do it because there was no inheritance at that time. When my grandparents died, all their assets passed to me, their savings, the car, and the house. Luckily, the house was paid off and in excellent condition. My grandfather had put on a new roof and had painted it inside and out after my grandmother died. A neighbor, who was a plumber, redid all the plumbing, so the house was impeccable. At the funeral, I could see my parents talking secretly between themselves while looking at me from afar. Later, I found out they knew my grandparents had disinherited them long ago, due to how they treated me as a child. Needless to say, in my parents' logic, this was unfair. When the will was read and it became clear that I inherited everything, they threatened to sue. I started receiving constant angry calls and messages from my father saying he was the rightful heir. I always responded with, "Go to hell," or other things I'd better not repeat here. I don't want my post to be deleted. In the end, they went to court, but luckily it didn't drag on for long. The judge ruled in my favor after hearing both sides, especially when I recounted the mistreatment I suffered as a child. For example, once, when I was 5 years old, they left me locked outside the house in the middle of winter for hours, while they watched TV inside. All because I wanted to watch my cartoons and didn't want to change the channel. I understand that I could have accepted letting other people watch something, but I was just a child. On another occasion, when I was 6, they went out at night to dinner somewhere and left me alone at home for a couple of hours, I think. They finally returned, but since they had already eaten, they didn't prepare dinner for me, and I had to go to bed without eating that night. The judge told my father that in his entire career, he had never seen a worse example of parenting. He said nothing then, but afterwards, outside the courthouse, he stopped me to tell me that I had ruined his life, that I was the worst mistake he had ever made. He said that if he could turn back time, he would make sure I wasn't born, because it was my fault he couldn't become a baseball star. Instead, he ended up in a job where he wears his name on a tag. For your information, he still works in a fast food place. He got a promotion, but only to supervisor. He no longer flips burgers, but his career has clearly peaked and there's nowhere for him to go from there. I replied that my grandparents realized what kind of people he and my mother were, and that's why they disinherited them. That I didn't ask to be born, that was their responsibility. And that the only parental love I knew was from my grandparents. That for me, my parents are dead. For a while afterwards, I kept receiving messages, emails, and even letters, but eventually they got tired of me not responding. When they called me on the phone, I would answer, leave the device on the table, and walk away, leaving them yelling alone on the other end. Throughout this time, they never showed any real interest in me. They only wanted the money and the house. From what I saw on Facebook, my sister tried to be a model, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, and now complains about her current job. My father has been in the same job for 25 years. Before that, he worked at another fast food place until it closed. His best moment was clearly in high school. The same goes for my mother. She was a cheerleader in school and has her old uniform framed. She always complains about her job on her social media. I'm in my 30s and live quite well thanks to my grandparents. I have no debts, I own my house, and can save a large part of my salary. I didn't go to university because when I finished high school my grandparents couldn't afford it, but I managed to find a good job with a decent salary to live comfortably. I've always worked very hard, thanks to my grandfather, who taught me what it means to make an effort. I'm not rich, but I don't lack anything, and that's enough for me. Also, not having to pay a mortgage or rent allows me to save a lot. The problem is that my parents showed up again, and they did it because they want my house. They've always lived in rentals, and now that they're older they want to start saving. Unlike other stories I've read here, which encourage me to write my story, they don't want it to give to my sister, but for themselves. A few days ago they showed up at my workplace making a scene, demanding to speak to me and saying they were going to camp outside my house until I agreed to give it to them. I had to call security to remove them. I thought that would be enough, but now they've literally set up a tent in my front yard. They did it this afternoon. When I got home from work, the tent was there, with a bunch of stuff around it. I asked them what exactly they were doing, and my father replied that they would stay until I gave them the house, which legitimately belongs to them because I stole it from my grandparents. I told him he could gather his things and leave right now because I wouldn't give him the house, or I could call the police to explain everything to them as we did with the judge. My father said the only way he would leave was if I gave him the key to my house so they could move their things inside. I replied, well, if you want to play that game, let's play, and I headed for the door. As I was putting the key in, I saw my father following me, as if expecting to enter. Before opening, I put my phone's recorder on and put it in my pocket. I asked him to step aside to let me in, but he said nothing. When I finally opened the door, he tried to push past me, but I grabbed his arm and threw him back onto the lawn. He shouted that he couldn't prevent him from entering his house and that sooner or later he would, even if he had to kick the door down. I finally went in, locked the door, and called the police. My mother watched everything from outside without intervening. When the police arrived, I told them what had happened and showed them the recording of my father's threats. He wasn't expecting me to be recording, so he couldn't make up another version. The officers stayed until my parents gathered their things and left. I invited them in for coffee, as it was cold, and I wanted to thank them for removing my parents. Now I'm thinking about installing security cameras around the house in case they try anything else, but I'm open to any other advice. Update 1. A couple of days have passed since my last post, and I wanted to thank you all for your advice and support. One of the best pieces of advice I received was to keep a copy of the recording of my father's threats in the cloud, just in case. I've already done that, and I feel more at ease knowing it's safe. Also, to try for a restraining order, although the commenter told me that the chances of getting one might not be in my favor, but I could try. Anyway, I'm grateful for all the advice. This weekend I plan to install security cameras around my house. The good news is that I've already ordered them and they'll arrive tomorrow. Since my grandfather taught me so many practical things when I lived with them, I think I'll be able to install them myself. At least, I hope so. My grandfather always said it was important to be self-sufficient and be able to fix things yourself. We spent countless hours together fixing appliances, furniture, and even doing small repairs around the house. Thanks to that, I feel quite confident with tools and following instructions. Installing the cameras should be a piece of cake, right? But the worst that can happen is that it's more difficult than I thought, and I have to call a professional. As for my parents, fortunately, they haven't tried anything else since the tin incident. But I know them, and I know they must be planning their next move. That's why I want to be prepared. But the update is because yesterday I received an unexpected call. It was my sister. In all these years, even when my parents were fighting over the inheritance, she had never contacted me. Not a call, not a message, nothing. So I was very surprised that she called me. Let's say our relationship is non-existent. I don't even consider her my sister because we never had a sibling relationship. When I was little, I had almost no contact with her as she was younger, and then, when I moved in with my grandparents, we didn't even talk. I answered because the number was unknown. After a brief and awkward greeting, where she told me who she was, she got straight to the point. I didn't recognize her voice because the first time I saw her as an adult was at the funeral, and we didn't exchange words there either. She told me that I should give the house to our parents, that she knew I had received money, and that she thought it was fair that I at least give them the house. She said she would do it if she could, but with 2 kids, a bad job, and a divorce, she didn't have money to help them. But I know that's a lie. I'm almost certain she receives alimony from her ex-husband. And from what I've seen on her social media, her job doesn't seem that bad. She's always posting photos of her office, and it doesn't seem to be a bad job. So I don't believe that she has no money. Honestly, my sister has never been directly mean to me, but she hasn't been a good sister either. She's always had that air of superiority and entitlement, as if the world owed her something. Even as children, when our parents treated me badly and favored her, she never said anything. She never defended me or showed empathy. That's why this call smells fishy to me. I think my sister might be plotting something, possibly in complicity with my parents. Maybe they think that if she intervenes, I'll give in. But they're wrong. I'm not going to fall for their game. I told her, with all the calm I could muster, that I wasn't going to give them the house, that our grandparents left it to me for a reason, and that I was going to respect their will. If she wanted to help our parents, she was free to do so, but not to involve me. She got angry and started yelling at me, telling me I was selfish and a bad son, that our parents gave us life and that we owed them everything, as if giving me life compensated for all the years of neglect and mistreatment. I replied that parents who abandon and neglect their child deserve nothing, and that I owed them absolutely nothing. After that, I hung up. I'm not here to put up with more abuse and manipulation, neither from my parents nor from my sister. This is my life, my house, and I'm going to protect it. If that makes me a bad son in my sister's eyes, so be it. I've spent too many years trying to earn the love and approval of people who clearly don't deserve it. So that's the latest gossip, friends. I promise to keep you updated with any news. And again, thank you for being there and for your words of encouragement. You don't know how much it means to me to have this space to vent and receive advice. It makes me feel less alone in this craziness. It's not easy to talk about it with people in real life because it's not like someone asks you what you did last night and you answer, "Kicked my parents out of my yard, and you?" Same, thanks for asking. It's easier to do it anonymously and with people who don't know you. So if you have more suggestions, I'm all ears. Especially if someone has been through a similar situation and has experience dealing with toxic family members. All help is welcome. And for those who have asked if I would consider moving, I have thought about it. However, I have my job in this city, and it would only be worth it if I could move somewhere else to get away from my toxic family. But even if I could do it, the truth is that I like this house and my grandparents left it to me, so it's not like I could or would want to sell it. So at least that's out of the question. Update 2. Good news, friends. I finally managed to install the security cameras around my house. But let me tell you, it was quite an odyssey. I started on Saturday afternoon with all the enthusiasm in the world. I had my toolbox, the instructions, and a YouTube tutorial ready on my phone. I thought, how hard can it be? Well, first mistake. It turns out the instructions were in Chinese. I don't know why I assumed they would be in English, but there I was, trying to decipher hieroglyphics. Thank God for Google Translate. After an hour of struggling with the translation, I was finally ready to start. But then I realized I was missing a drill. How was I supposed to mount the cameras without a drill? So I had to pause and run to the hardware store. 2 hours and a hardware store later, I was back home, ready for action. I started with the first camera. Everything was going well until I realized I had placed it upside down. Great. I had to unscrew everything and start over. By the time I finished with the first camera, it was already dark. But I was determined to finish the job. So I carried on, with the help of a flashlight and my trusty YouTube tutorial. Finally, after a lot of sweat, some swear words, and a worrying amount of coffee, I managed to install all the cameras. It was 2 a.m. on Sunday when I finished. But I did it myself, just as my grandfather taught me. I'm sure from somewhere, he was laughing at my misadventures, but also proud of my perseverance. Now, moving on to less funny topics. I've been thinking a lot about my sister's call, and the possibility that she might also be planning to move into my house along with my parents. It occurred to me that I could try to get more information about it. So I went on Facebook and searched among my sister's friends. I found a girl with whom she seems to have several photos together, although they don't look like best friends, more like coworkers. I decided to send her a message, introducing myself as my sister's brother. She seemed surprised to hear from me, which confirms that my sister never mentions me. We started talking a bit, and I quickly realized that this girl doesn't seem to have the best opinion of my sister. She told me that my sister is always complaining at work, that she treats everyone with an air of superiority, and that she's always talking about how much she deserves a better life. What a surprise. But then she mentioned something that caught my attention. She said that my sister has been having problems with the apartment she rents. Apparently, she's been a couple of months behind on rent, and the landlord has threatened to evict her. This made me think, what if my sister is also planning to move into my house? My grandparents' house is quite large, with 3 bedrooms. It would be very comfortable for my parents and for her with her children. I'm starting to believe that's their plan. First, my sister tries to convince me to give the house to my parents, and then she plans to move in too. It's crazy to think that they don't even consider that it's my house now. Update 3. Guys, you won't believe what happened yesterday. I was reviewing the security camera footage and saw something that left me cold. First, I noticed my father's car passing by my house a couple of times. This was around 4 p.m. I thought it was strange, but I didn't give it much importance. Maybe he was just passing by, right? But then, about 30 minutes later, I saw my father walking down the street. I guess he must have parked further ahead to avoid raising suspicion. He approached my house, looking around as if checking that no one was watching. What he did next left me speechless. He jumped over the fence of my backyard like a thief. Thank God I had put a camera there too. I saw him approach the windows at the back of the house and look through them, trying to see inside. I was completely bewildered. What the hell was he doing? Was he trying to find a way in? Or was he just spying to see the layout of the house? The strangest thing of all is that he didn't seem to notice the cameras. Or if he did, he didn't care. It's as if he was so focused on his reconnaissance mission that he didn't think about the possibility of being recorded. I watched as he walked around the house, testing the windows to see if any were open. Fortunately, I'm always very careful about that. All windows were securely closed. After about 15 minutes, he finally gave up. He jumped the fence again and disappeared into the night as stealthily as he had arrived. I immediately made a copy of the recording and saved it in multiple places, including the cloud. If I need to use this as evidence at some point, I want to make sure it's safe. But honestly, I'm scared. I never thought my own parents could stoop so low. It's as if they have no limits in their eagerness to get my house. On the other hand, there has been something positive in all this madness. Remember I told you I contacted a coworker of my sister on Facebook? Well, we've continued talking and I must say she's an amazing girl. She's funny, intelligent, and unlike my sister, she seems to have a genuine heart. Well, she seems to have a heart. We've been talking every day, and I like talking to her more and more. The best part is that she's single. I know it might seem crazy, considering everything that's going on with my family, but I can't help feeling attracted to her. I'm thinking of asking her out, even if it's just for coffee and to talk in person. I know some might say it's not the right time, with all the family drama and everything. But honestly, I could use a positive distraction right now. Something to remind me that there's life beyond all this mess. Of course, I'm not going to tell her all the details of my family problems right away. I don't want to scare her off. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep an eye on the cameras. Now, more than ever, I need to be on guard. I don't know what my parents might try next, but I'm not going to let them take me by surprise. Thanks again for being there, listening to my ramblings. I can't emphasize enough how much it means to me to have this place. Update 4. Guys, so much has happened since my last update that I don't even know where to start. But first, let me tell you that I was right. My parents were definitely plotting something, and now I have the proof. After what happened, I decided to review the camera footage in more detail. What I discovered left me breathless. It turns out that my father's nighttime visit wasn't an isolated incident. He's been lurking around my house on multiple occasions, at different times of the day, even when I was inside sleeping. In one of the recordings, I saw him trying to look through my bedroom window at 2 a.m. He was on tiptoes, trying to see over the curtain. I shuddered to think that while I was in bed, my own father was out there, spying on me. But that's not all. Last week, I had to travel for work for a couple of nights. It was a last-minute trip, so I didn't have much time to prepare everything. I made sure the house was securely locked and left, thinking everything would be fine. I was so busy with work during the trip that I didn't even think to check the cameras. When I returned home, I opened the door and immediately knew something was wrong. There were boxes everywhere and things out of place. For a second, I thought I had been robbed. But then I saw a family photo on the wall, and it all clicked. They weren't burglars. They were my parents. Although, well, I think burglars are better people than them. I rushed to check the security recordings, and there it all was, like a horror movie. My parents, taking advantage of my absence, had forcibly entered the house. In the video, you can see my father breaking the back window in the middle of the night and entering. Then he goes to the garage and opens the door from the inside, allowing my mother to enter with boxes and suitcases. Over the next 2 days, I watched in horror as they gradually moved into my house. They brought many boxes with things. It was as if they were preparing the house for themselves. I can't even begin to describe the rage and helplessness I felt watching those images. First, I called the police. I explained the whole situation to them and told them I needed their help. Then, taking advantage of the fact that it was early and my parents were at work, I started taking out all their things. And when I say all, I mean all. Every box, every piece of clothing, every object that wasn't mine, I took out of the house. I didn't care if it was delicate or valuable. I grabbed everything and threw it in the front yard in a big pile. Just as I finished, the police arrived. I showed them all the security footage, along with the mess I had made with my parents' belongings. They took my statement and then left, telling me they would handle everything. A few hours later, I received a call from the police station. My parents had been arrested at their jobs for breaking and entering. Apparently, when the police told them what I had done, they got into a big argument, yelling at each other and blaming each other. It was quite a spectacle. It's been a week since then, and my parents are still in jail. My sister has been calling me nonstop, begging me to drop the charges. But I'm not going to do it. I'm tired of their manipulations and lack of respect. I think some time behind bars is just what they need to understand the gravity of what they've done. I told my sister directly. If she keeps defending their actions and trying to manipulate me, she could end up in the same place as them. I don't care if she's the golden child. I'm not going to tolerate any more abuse from any of them. However, I do feel bad for her children. It's not their fault they have such a toxic mother. I hope that, somehow, this is a wake-up call for her, and that she starts thinking about the example she's setting for them. I'm still not sure if my sister was directly involved in my parents' plan to enter my house. My theory is that she manipulated them into doing it, with the intention of moving in with them once they had control of the property. But beyond her constant defense of them, I have no concrete evidence of her involvement. Either way, I plan to go ahead with the legal process. I want my parents to face a trial and, hopefully, receive a conviction. I know it may sound harsh, but I feel it's the only way they'll understand that their actions have consequences. I can't live with the constant fear that they'll invade my home and my life whenever they please. I need to put an end to this, for my own mental and emotional health. Meanwhile, I've been working on reinforcing the security of the house. I've installed an alarm, and I'm considering putting up a higher fence. I don't want to live in a fortress, but I don't want to feel vulnerable in my own home again either. I promise I'll be back with updates when I have more information about the case. Update 5. 6 months have passed since my last update, and here I am to tell you the news. After so long, I have some good news to share. First things first, the trial against my parents. After months of preparation and an exhausting legal process, the verdict finally came. The judge showed no mercy and gave them a sentence of 1 year in state prison. I guess they'll have plenty of time to think about their actions while enjoying the comfortable bunk beds in prison. They can't say I'm a bad son. I got them first-class accommodations, all paid for a year. In addition to the sentence, the judge also ordered them to pay me $5,000 in compensation for the damage they caused to my property. I don't think it's enough, but I'm satisfied that they went to jail. As for my sister, I still haven't been able to definitively prove that she was involved in my parents' plan. And to be honest, I'm starting to doubt that she was. I know it's hard to believe, given her track record, but I haven't found any concrete evidence linking her. I guess it's something I'll never know for sure. But it hasn't all been stress and legal drama. Remember the girl I met through all this mess? My sister's co-worker? Well, after months of talking and supporting each other, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. And friends, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. We've been dating for 3 months now, and every day I feel more and more lucky to have her in my life. She's compassionate, understanding, and makes me laugh even on the darkest days. She's been a ray of light in the midst of all this craziness. She even came with me to some of the trial hearings, which made everything easier. Now, looking to the future, I'm taking steps to ensure that my parents can't turn my life upside down again when they get out of prison. I'm preparing a restraining order, but I'm waiting to file it closer to their release date. My lawyer says it's better to do it that way, so that the order goes into effect just as they get out and they don't have a chance to cause more trouble, as these orders usually have a duration. So I want to keep them as far away as possible for as long as possible. I've also been making some improvements to the house. Nothing major, just small projects here and there to make it feel more like my home again. It's been therapeutic in a way, like reclaiming my space and creating new memories. Thanks to Reddit and this community, I don't know how difficult all this could have been without being able to post here.